Hey guys, it's Slight here, and we're going to do a little overexplain on spores. You see this calculator I've made that's very complicated. And we're going to do a little rant on, we're going to start with rant, all right, of course, get into the spicy stuff. As a warning, I don't have my desktop set up yet, the audio quality, the video quality are clearly not as good as they are. If you are getting some negative or unkind background noise, take your headphones off and watch with speakers. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the reason we're ranting first, right, is because, let's see if I can click the right, oh, I need to go like this. Okay, so I watched this morning, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, dude, Spore Gemini does need a nerf. Like, I've watched Spore Gemini, and it looks like this guy has, I think you guys can see this pretty clearly. He's got a rainbow with a pretty good rainbow, right? With a bunch of lucky shot, and he's got the plus 50% rate of fire when the magazine is full. That's a great one on the rainbow. And then he's Spore Gemini'd it with a porcupine, which makes sense because porcupine has so many projectiles. So that seems like it'd be a really no-brainer win. He's upgrading the porcupine instead of the rainbow. So this player obviously knows a little bit about Spore and how to maximize it, because the way Spore works is that this will end up with more damage. So I'm like, okay, all right, this guy knows what he's doing. And, I don't know what's optimal. As I'm watching it this morning, things have changed since this morning. But, I don't know what's optimal at this point. Here, let's go back. Does he have, he's got, the main thing I'm looking for is fish or bear paw. I don't, unless I am totally just missing it, I don't see it. I don't think that's fish or bear paw. Pause. JK, he does have fish or bear paw. Okay, so that is very, very good for spores. That essentially sort of doubles his damage because each hit applies a spore stack, and the spore damage is what's doing crazy damage. So this right here is fish or bear paw. First, I thought it was, anyway, let's continue. Let's just see. So I missed that the first time, but we're learning. We're doing it live, right? All right. And man, that is one dead Reincarnation 8 Pole Monarch. I mean, look, this is incredibly powerful, right? Undeniably, this is the hardest difficulty in the game. Does this look hard? You answer for yourself personally, which is a way of trapping you into, if you answer incorrectly, then you're wrong, right? Okay, so that was great. I was like, oh well, yeah, it's really strong. All right, I just did a video about spores, and I like mindlessly played the game and absolutely crushed through the whole thing. So what really got me juiced up this morning, and this is me, I'm covering for being sick. Okay, it's 6:30 in the morning. Come down here to Zohan 4EG. Okay, now look, I'm not gonna be rude to this person. Okay, but let's read his comment out. He's got a lot of people who agree. Not me. You see my down doot right there. That's a down doot. Possibly due to the speed of killing normal mobs and lack of need for targeting. So that's what he says is the reason that spores would be nerfed. However, in the video you show killing a boss, and I can name a few weapons that deal with this much faster if they do not one-shot. Okay, so his essential argument is that the evidence that you're supplying for Spore being nerfed is not valid because there are other things in the game that can do it just as easily, all right? Or rather, that can do it. It would be implied that it's just as easily. One would make the assumption that this person, if they're going to make this argument, would try to equivocate the two things, try to make them as similar as possible, right? So it should be as accessible or relatively accessible as making a Spore Gemini, any comparisons that are made, right? Because at the current point, I can make Spore Gemini on any character as long as I get a shotgun and a injector. Okay, and it's powerful. It's incredibly powerful, and each of them are powerful for different reasons. I'd also like to say a patch came out where some of the bugs with spores kind of got fixed, and some of them were making it extra OP, and I'll show you that. But remember that this all happened before the context of that update. All right, so my understanding is that all of this information was shared before those changes occurred, and those changes really don't impact things. I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, right? Okay, so however, in the video you showed the killing of the boss. All right, so the first one he suggests is the 2-shot magazine wild hunt, which is an exclusive inscription that, you don't get all the time on a specific weapon with one of the most rare scrolls in the game. All right. The next one is Rainbow Arch with 2 exclusive inscriptions. And me knowing as much as I do about Gunfire, those really need to be like the +1 projectile, +100% combustion. Maybe Lucky Shot on hit would be the other best one that you could get as an exclusive, or maybe like an Elemental Share. But the Elemental Share isn't really good with Rainbow Arch. So I'm curious as to what those 2 exclusives are. I think there is one exclusive that specifically improves the secondary, and that's extremely rare. So that might do it, which, I think maybe you could get an opportunity to play a run with that Rainbow Arch, maybe 1 out of 50, 60 runs. That's off the top of my head, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's really, really rare to get a Rainbow Arch that's cranked, that you can crank, right? Concealed ammo with the extremely rare every 6 bullets concealed ammo exclusive inscription on dog specifically. So if you get it on someone else who's not dog, it's not as good. Demon lore, not dragon lore, but demon lore, which is okay. You don't need to know all the names. I'm responding to each of these arguments, each of these points, not to ridicule Zohan 4EG, but to just have a legitimate response to them. And just because you don't know the name of something doesn't mean that your logic isn't valid. So you're not being invalidated by simply saying something's wrong. I just wanted to say that it's not dragon lore, it's demon lore. On rabbit with the rarest scroll in the game, one of the rarest scrolls in the game. That is obviously extremely strong. And there's other ways to do it. You don't need Advanced Depot. You can use Against the Flow. You can use Skateboarder. You can use Ammo Extractor. That is a known, incredibly overpowered combo. Yes. And it is very, very good. That being said, it does require 1 specific weapon and 1 of 4 very hard to find, or 1 of 4 essentially scrolls. Sorry, I heard a noise and it threw me off. Number 5 is, I think, something that doesn't make sense if we think about it, right? A demon lore with auto aim on rabbit is not going to help us with bosses, right? Because we need to hit 5 enemies, which will trigger the auto aim, and that's when we get that really crazy room killing type of thing, right? So demon lore with auto aim on rabbit is actually significantly worse in this particular room. You would definitely need some no reload synergy for that to be valid, and the auto aim is not going to help you. Golden Bow on lay low. Look, Golden Bow on lay low can do crazy damage, and it has the potential to one-shot bosses and do crazy damage. But you need good ascensions, all right? You need a good Golden Bow, and they are not all good, and not any Golden Bow will do. You need Lucky Shot. You need specific inscriptions for it to work, and you need specific ascensions and game knowledge to maximize that damage. On Reincarnation 8, I challenge you to show me you within the next couple days one-shotting doing crazy damage to the boss with Golden Bow and solo R8 with Mysterious Joe Cool. I think it's harder than it seems. I would assume that would take multiple runs, at the very least, multiple runs for you to achieve. It's not a guarantee at all. Any SMG with your build will be more powerful. Now, we'll talk about this. This is not true. You really wouldn't want to switch out an SMG for this build, and it almost certainly won't do more damage than the Spores will. There are SMGs that do crazy damage, and like Scalpels with Crit Geminis and Elemental Geminis do some really, really good stuff, right? So moving on, Lee is incredibly powerful. She's very overpowered, and she just was nerfed. Her conflagration skill, which just got nerfed, and reasonably so. She'll probably need more nerfs to be reasonable. And Atomic Bomb is incredibly overpowered. Once again, Lee needs some good ascensions, not much, right, to be extremely powerful. Atomic Bomb Dog needs a specific blessing to be that powerful. It is only on 1 hero. The big thing that I want you to recognize about this argument that you've put together is that it really doesn't make sense with the context of what you're saying. The point is that Spore Gemini is overpowered, and it's overpowered in such a way that any character can extremely easily build it any game, all right? And right now, in the higher level of play, which is an important player base, all right? I'm not saying it's everything, and I'm not saying we should only balance around that, okay? But they are players, and their voices do need to be heard, okay? As well as people who are more casual, Okay, we got to get along here. There's already a huge amount of incredibly overpowered blessings, builds in the game. Elemental Gemini is extremely oppressive, and it's fun. Don't get me wrong, it is fun, and I use it. But when you maximize that Gemini, it's completely overpowered. And so now to have Spore be better than what was considered the best and what was already considered like a little bit oppressive when it was abused correctly is a problem, and so these things that you bring up sort of work, but they don't really address the core issue, is that it's accessibility that's the real problem here, and not about the potential to one-shot or easily kill a boss. You can get lucky in any roguelike and do that, but the reason that Spore is overpowered has nothing to do with that. And frankly, I'm not here to say that Spore is like the worst thing ever that's ever existed. I kind of think that, with the way that I'm playing the game, Slight's way, I can't reforge Geminis. So this rarely gives me the opportunity to find the maximum use case for Spores. So Spores actually tends to be pretty useful because I have to use it in a suboptimal way. It's really only overpowered in this optimized way when people are sort of abusing it like this. And importantly enough, the video above is not even close to the optimized version of this build. Not even absolutely close. I just want you to show you, at the time that this all came out, let me show you on the Discord, Walter, who is a Spore addict these days and has really taken a deep dive into it, put this video out. And so let's see what an actually powerful Spore build looks like. Uh-huh. He's not moving. I love that. He doesn't even move. He's just stands there. Right? Okay, so a couple things. For one, this has been patched out. Okay, Spores just got a bug fix where they were applying elemental effects. So what you're seeing here is some Lee cheese where you can use a blessing that guarantees your next hit will always trigger burning. And then I think he has, I can't remember how he's applying corrosion exactly. And then Spore as well. I can't remember how. Oh, it must be that the rainbow itself is corrosive. Yeah. So then you get guaranteed combustion procs on every hit of the rainbow and every spore as well, which is a 200% multiplicative damage increase, which is astronomically overpowered. We just finished. Just 20 seconds. Let's just sit back and relax. So this is why at the time Spore is considered overpowered. Not because, a suboptimal way. Like imagine playing, like this would crush our R8 4-player. You wouldn't even get to shoot. Like you're making this case that like let's tab back. He goes on to say that starting with co-op, the Spore Rainbow no longer deals that much damage. And that's not true. It doesn't get scaled back. It still does crazy damage. The damage is so high that it's still relevant. Absolutely. And I mean, with a setup like this, now that particular setup is a bit, unique. Like it's going to be really tough to get a corrosion rainbow. But let's look at what I would consider like the baseline best use case for the weapon compared to what's being used here in this particular video. And let's get a sense of, where this particular video sits in the context of the Spore conversation. Okay, so I know this is a lot of information on the screen. All right, I'm going to walk you through it. Don't worry, okay? What we're going to be doing is we're going to compare two Spore loadouts. I made this Excel spreadsheet. It breaks it down really easy. Just follow along, okay? So in the video we just watched, he had a level 10 rainbow, okay, and a level 41 porcupine, all right? And the rainbow was the weapon that he was shooting, right? So it shoots one projectile, 15 rounds per second, and that adds up to a weapon DPS of around 1,125 damage per second. The Spore damage is 3,334 damage. Now that Spore damage is calculated down here at the bottom, all right? The way that it works, okay, simple, is you take the base damage of weapon 1 times its projectiles, you add that to the base damage of weapon 2 times its number of projectiles, multiply all that by 20, and then divide by the total projectiles combined of both weapons. Okay, so this is why it becomes worth it to upgrade the Porcupine instead of the Rainbow. Watch this. If I reverse these two numbers, so I put the 10 with the Porcupine and the 41 with the Rainbow, look how low my Spore damage is. All right, and the reason that is so low is because if we look down here, when weapon 2's base damage gets multiplied by its projectile count, we're getting a significantly higher amount of damage because of that upgrade is applying to every single projectile. Normally, the limitation with shotguns is that some of the projectiles miss, and that allows that kind of balances the weapon. You know, that's why accuracy is so incredibly good on Hell and Wild Hunt, right? Because if you hit all your projectiles, I mean, people just die, all right? But in this calculation, that's not the case. It's counting every projectile, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, but that means that we're reaping every bit of reward of these upgrades, and they're going right into the Spore calculation. So let's switch this back. 41 on the Porcupine and 10 on the Rainbow. Okay, so we've got a Spore damage of 3,034. The Spore only damage of shooting this weapon. So we're getting 15 ticks of Spore damage every second from the Rainbow. That's 50,000 DPS, all right? And then if we include the weapon DPS, it's 51,000. So by using this setup here, we get essentially a 4,500%, is that right? Yeah, 4,500% damage increase for this weapon from this Gemini, all right, which is astronomical. I mean, that is that is just coming from the Gemini abuse. This doesn't account for any inscriptions. You know, if we had a 50% rate of fire bonus on this, so it went from 15 to 22.5, our DPS would, it doesn't increase the percentage, but it does increase the actual DPS. The sheet can't really capture that. It looked like a 25% damage increase overall, a 50% damage increase overall, excuse me. Okay, so now let's take a look at if this was a slightly more optimized. There are better builds, but I think the baseline here is to use like kind of the best weapon for this, and Porcupine I think is like mid-tier at Spore. Argus is the best weapon. If you had just swapped out the Porcupine for an Argus, you would instead be doing almost 11,000 damage per Spore tick. Your total DPS would be 166,000 damage per second. And the difference between the DPS of these two builds is astronomical. Build 1, which is the video, which was easily destroying the Pole Monarch, all right, is doing 1/3 as much DPS as if he had done an Argus in the same way. Okay, so when we make a counter case against some random video, it is incredibly easy for me to find a Rainbow and an Argus in any game, and just to pump the Argus and Gemini them with a Spore. I mean, I can do that every single run. Why is this OP? It's because of that. All right, that's the argument at least. Okay, so when people, when I see people thumbsing up a response like that, what it signals to me, and this should not, and I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, is that a little bit of groupthink is going on. Like, I don't think it's overpowered. It doesn't impact me. All right. I don't think things should be nerfed because it's PvE game. So I see someone who typed out a long response that, seems to share my at least opinion. I'm going to thumbs it up. Okay. And you need to be a little bit more critical with your thinking to be effective. You can go ahead and thumb that up. You have free will and you're a free person most likely. So, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. But the question is that useful? Is that actually moving the conversation forward in any meaningful way? And I think that's a much harder conversation to have. So one thing that I really try to do when I'm reading a comment like that is really think it through. I mean, a lot of the arguments that are made in that comment on Reddit really don't apply directly to the situation and to why it needs to be nerfed. What is the argument? I mean, granted, it is killing things fast, but there's this larger context about whether Spore is balanced or not, okay? That's not communicated in this video. This video is just showing you the damage, all right? And when you're deciding whether or not something is valid or invalid or making a judgment about something, one should always consider the context of what one doesn't know, okay? What is the larger context of this whole conversation? What do I not know about it? And I think the thing that bothered me the most about this particular comment and some of the comments below are that they really don't include any room for their own ignorance. And this is a human flaw, okay? It's normal to feel sure, even though there's no good reason to, all right? And so I think, and like even my comment here is, probably suffers from the exact same, problem. And I have more experience in the game, almost certainly, almost certainly. And I could be wrong about that, but almost certainly I do. I probably don't have as much experience with multiplayer though, but especially in solo. So I'm sort of leveraging that. But even for me here, I'm not accounting for my ignorance. What if this player actually really does know what he's talking about and I'm missing something, right? And if this was a better, comment here that might actually be true, and I've been burned by that. I've been burned by my own tendency to feel like I'm right. So I think the thing that bothered me is just not accounting for your own ignorance. Like, I think that this is a fair comment because it possibly does need to be done by the speed of killing normal mobs. But I think that fundamentally that this doesn't really address the whole conversation. All right, so let me pop back to Spore Calculator real quick. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do really quick is just take a look at what it would take to get a golden bow, all right, into the same amount of damage, okay? Remember that this damage, where are we at? Right here. Okay, this damage is just Rainbow and Argus, just upgrades, doesn't care about inscriptions, doesn't include even any weapon damage, and weapon damage that applies to the player applies to the spores. So you can get, like if you get the starting blessing of overconsumption, or even get it in Act 2, your damage is going to skyrocket through the roof, which is what happened in my most recent video. So let me just try to make, what's my target here? My target is 166,000 DPS for a baseline weapon. All right, so we definitely need some lucky shot. All right, this was at 15 upgrades already. Let's put it up to 35. Let's give it 46, which is the combined total of both of those. All right, so if we're critting every shot, we're getting to 120,000. Here we're at 125. Oh, and then maybe we can get our crit, like double our crit to 8. Okay, so now we're starting to get there. Okay, so if we have like a crit X Gemini with 100% lucky shot, and we hit all of our projectiles, we're starting to get there. Let's say, unlike the Rainbow, we actually do miss. So let's say we miss half of our shots. I think that's pretty fair. Okay, well, now we're back down. Okay. What else can we increase? Rate of fire increase. That's probably not going to be super helpful, but maybe we get like a 25% rate of fire increase. Maybe we get some other multiplicative damage increase, of which there are many. I'm just trying to get a sense of what it takes to get there. Okay, so here we are. We're kind of about there. All right. So we need a 46 golden bow. We need to hit at least half of our shots, which is doable. We need a crit X Gemini. We need 100% lucky shot from either inscriptions or what am I trying to say? Inscriptions or scrolls. And we need some kind of 40% multiplicative boost. All right. And one thing that's interesting to know is that Spores doesn't really benefit from lucky shot. So lucky shot's one of these that's like, if you apply it to the weapon, the golden bow, it's kind of like an exclusive thing, right? Just something to keep in mind. I don't think that really impacts the comparison too much. But one thing that does impact the comparison is that some of these other things, like the multiplicative damage increase, the rate of fire increase, those would also increase the damage of the spores significantly. 46 upgrades is a lot, but I think that's fair considering how many upgrades they had. They had a 41 and a 10. So I mean, maybe this is somewhere around like, 38 by the end of the run, depending on when you get it. And see, that dumps us down a lot more. Now we need even more things. Like, so if they have like a debuff on them where they're taking 20% more multiplicative damage, that's starting to get there, right? With like the crit X increase. So I think it's useful to look at this. And also these damage numbers are based on full draw only. So I think this is correct for full draw base damages and stuff like that. And some people are much better at shooting than I am. You know, I probably do miss half my shots. And I certainly don't crit. But this assumes every shot's a crit. You know, if you're not critting, you know, you're doing this, right? You know, you're doing 53,000 damage. All right? So like to get like if you're so you're missing a certain amount of your shots and you're not critting all your shots, but if you're only getting close to the DPS if you're critting every shot, okay? Critting every shot but missing half your shots, right? So you can see where this comparison gets a little weird. Like the golden bow is definitely not nearly as easy or accessible to get this kind of crazy damage. It can, right? Especially on lay low when you have all these multiplicative damage increases to snipers and stuff like that, and you have that surging crits extra ability to crit. But the comparison is just not a one-to-one comparison. It really doesn't address the concerns here. So with all that being said, I will put my damage calculator and my Spore loadout calculator in the comments and in the description below, so you can use them if you want to. If you want to use these, just kind of play around with them. Go to File up here in the top left. I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Go to File and then make a copy. And then you, if you don't have a Google Doc, like a Google account, you'll need to like sign in or set one up or whatever. That way you can use it on Google Docs. And then you'll be able to use it, no problem. Same thing with the damage calculator as well. I've got a link to the wiki page and my YouTube channel. And I got a couple little bit of information for those of you who are staying until the end. This is kind of just like some juicier stuff that's a little bit more niche. I am going to do a follow-up video with which just has some builds for each character to take advantage of spores. A big shout out, by the way, I meant to mention this earlier, big shout out to Walter, who kind of talked with me yesterday about spores and kind of gave me some information I didn't really have. But as of today, we have some updates and that changed some of the most overpowered things you could do with spores, but not all of them, if I understand correctly. So one thing to keep in mind is that the spore damage itself gets improved by any weapon damage increases that apply to the player as opposed to the shot. So like energy, what is it called? Energy shot, fierce wings, that kind of stuff. Okay. Those apply to shots of weapons, and those don't increase the spore damage. But if you have plus 50 weapon damage while you are standing still, that's going to affect the spores, right? Spores can't gain any benefit from Lucky Shot, but they used to be able to crit. All right, they can't crit anymore. Let's see if I can remove this. I don't know if surging crits is still available. We're going to have to test that. This is all very new. Skill damage does not affect spore damage. One thing that's important is that these calculations below assume that someone's already at 30 stacks of spore. And so you apply spores at the rate of weapon 1 plus weapon 2's number of projectiles per hit. So if you have a fire tower and a wild hunt with 14 projectiles, every hit from your fire tower is going to apply 15 spores because it's your total projectiles between the two weapons, right? And there's some stuff that this doesn't, like there's a lot that this doesn't take into account, but it is a really useful, like a way of understanding, like how good something can be. These damage increases are crazy. From a level 10 rainbow, its DPS base increase is 14,000% just from having a Spore Gemini with the Argus on the second one. That's not including anything else that's going to apply to it. And remember, when we looked at the golden bow, we needed some other stuff to get there, right? And we needed good aim, all right? And we needed to hit all of our crits, right? All the stuff sort of stacks up. So I think hopefully this didn't feel too long or disingenuous or that it misrepresented the argument. I tried to do it fair, and I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with the argument. I will say right here at the end that, there is this argument that goes around that PvE games don't need balance. And I think I mentioned it on my channel, and I really get where this comes from, because really it's about the fun at the end of the day. And that's why I'm here. That's why I show up to play Gunfire Reborn. I'm not here to be an elitist. I'm not here to say I'm the best. I never have and I never will. In fact, I often say that I'm not the best player because I am definitely not. But I do have a specific kind of fun that I like to have. And Gunfire provides that to me sometimes. But other times it doesn't, and it takes it away from me. And, as someone who's here for the fun, my opinion on how to get there is just as valid as anyone else's. And just because it conflicts with yours doesn't mean it's wrong. All right. There are likely ways for everyone to get what they want on some level. And many more casual players already have 10s to 15s of builds that are so absurdly broken that they trivialize the game. And so adding more just reduces the actual play area for those who are not looking for that type of game experience. And when you say you don't need to balance it, I get that, and I see where you're coming from. But at the same time, for me to enjoy the game and for people like me, who we're not like speedrunners, but we really prefer a challenge, we see these types of changes as encroaching on the amount of space that we can comfortably enjoy the game at. And so PvE does need balance to some degree. We don't need it to be perfectly balanced, and you will never hear that come out of my mouth. If anyone says that, I would disagree with them. Maybe in an ideal world, it would be nicer if it was more balanced. But I want it just more balanced. Really, I'm just trying to keep the things that are really bad and way, 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 way too good from being quite so good. Just keep that band a little tighter. But one of the things that I've learned and recognized and sort of grown is that it's actually kind of helpful to have some stuff that's just incredibly overpowered, but not a lot of it. Like these 4 or 5 builds that are just like it used to be Lightning Messenger and Atomic Bomb and Elemental Maestro. These builds used to be just absolutely incredible. And so they would trivialize the game. And that was okay because you could avoid them for the most part. But, as the time goes on, we get less and less space. And more people saying PvE doesn't need balance. And I recognize that these balance issues don't affect you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be saying it. I recognize that in your multiplayer games, your teammates probably don't win the game so hard that you can't shoot anything because it's doable. All right. If people who know how to abuse stuff, and I don't like abusing that kind of stuff. I find something overpowered and I'll run it once and then I avoid it. Unless I think I can kind of spice it up. All right. And use it without using it in its most broken state. Right. So I think that does it. I think I'm rambling a little bit too long now. Hopefully this was useful. Hopefully this helps you understand Spore. If you have any questions about Spore, please ask me and I'll let you know. I do have a follow-up video that'll give a couple builds on Spore builds on each character so that you can try those out. Some of them are extremely powerful, but they might have changed because of the recent patch because there were bug fixes specific to Spore. So we'll have to do some testing. Anyway, see you later.